Victoria Okoro Langston was 34 years old, 8 months pregnant, and burying her mother when her husband of 6 years reached into his suit jacket and placed a manila envelope directly into her hands. Not a process server, not a stranger. Derek. The man she had loved for a decade, wearing the good black suit she had helped him pick out, pressing divorce papers into her palms at her mother's graveside while the casket was still being lowered into the ground. He leaned close, almost tender, and said quietly, "You've been served, Tori." Then he straightened his jacket and folded his hands like a man at a prayer service. He had been carrying that envelope inside his jacket through the entire funeral, through the eulogy, through the hymns, through the condolences. He had filed 6 days earlier, the same day Victoria had flown to Detroit to be with her dying mother. He looked at her the way a man looks at a problem he has already solved. What Derek Langston did not know, what he could not have imagined, was that 2 days later, Victoria would sit in an attorney's office and learn that her mother had just left her $7.1 billion, and she hadn't decided what to do with it yet. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The mirror didn't lie. Victoria Adayez Okoro Langston looked at her reflection and saw a woman who had cried all night and then stopped, the way a storm stops. Not gently, but suddenly, because there is simply nothing left. Her eyes were swollen. Her face was tight. But her hands were steady as she lifted her mother's pearl brooch from its velvet box and pressed the pin through the collar of her black dress. Steady hands. Her mother had taught her that. Gloria Adayezi Okoro had never once raised her voice in front of a client, a judge, or a difficult man. She raised it at incompetence, at injustice, at bad soup, but never in fear, and never to beg. She had built Okoro Beauté from a single shea butter formula mixed in a Lagos kitchen into a global luxury empire that spread across 4 continents in 40 years. And every single morning of her life, as far as Victoria knew, she had dressed herself deliberately, like armor, like intention. Victoria clicked the brooch into place. There. Outside the window, Detroit was still dark. The oak trees on the street were bare and still. 5:17 in the morning, and the world had not yet decided to begin. She pressed one hand flat against the curve of her belly. 8 months, heavy and warm and alive, and felt her daughter shift beneath her palm, slow and dreamy, unbothered by grief. "I know," Victoria whispered. "I know." She had been a corporate attorney once. A good one. She'd made partner track at 31 at a firm in Atlanta that did not hand that distinction to people it wasn't serious about. Contract law, financial litigation, the kind of work that required you to read a 50-page document and find the one sentence buried on page 37 that would unravel everything. She had been good at that. Quietly, steadily, completely good at it. Then Derek had said, "Be present for our family, Tori. You don't have to carry all of that anymore." He had said it softly, in the kitchen of their Atlanta home, his hands around a coffee mug, his voice full of something that sounded exactly like love. And the thing was, she had wanted to believe him. She had wanted, more than she could now comfortably admit, to be chosen. To be the thing someone built a life around, not just beside. So she had stepped back. She had told her firm she needed time. She had told herself it was temporary. Derek had started referring to her career in the past tense before she had signed a single form. When Tori was still practicing, he would say at dinner parties, smiling at her across the table, before she stepped away. And she would smile back, because what else is there to do when someone says a thing that bothers you but in a voice that sounds like pride? She thought about that now, in the dark, in front of the mirror. He had been emotional distant since the pregnancy announcement. Not cold, exactly. Derek was never exactly cold. He was more like a house where someone had quietly turned down all the thermostats by 3 degrees. Not enough to complain about. Just enough to always feel slightly less warm than you expected. In public, he was perfect. Hands on her back, his eyes finding hers across rooms with practiced warmth. He had walked into her mother's funeral service this morning, God, and worked the room like a man who had loved Gloria Okoro personally and deeply, which was a thing Victoria was no longer entirely sure he had done. Handshakes, shoulder pats. She was a remarkable woman. His voice, low and sincere and well-calibrated. She had watched him do it, filed it away somewhere without quite naming what she was filing. At the graveside, the cold came in off the city in flat gray sheets. The pastor's voice rose and fell over the casket. Dark wood, brass handles, her mother inside it, impossibly still. Victoria stood at the edge of the lowering, her heels sinking slightly into the January ground, one hand on her belly, one hand open at her side. She felt Derek move through the small cluster of mourners toward her. He's coming to stand with me, she thought. He's coming to hold my hand. She did not turn to watch him approach. She kept her eyes on the casket. She was ready to lean into him, just slightly, just enough to feel that the ground was still solid. He stopped beside her. She felt him reach into the interior pocket of his jacket. The good black suit. The one she had stood beside him in the store to pick out 2 years ago, her hand running down the sleeve, telling him, "Yes, this one. This is the one." He placed a manila envelope directly into her hands. His mouth was close to her ear. His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You've been served, Tori." He stepped back. She heard him straighten his jacket. When she turned, he had folded his hands in front of him. Clean, calm, patient. A man waiting for the service to end. She opened the envelope. Divorce petition. Filed 6 days ago. She read the date once, and then again, because her brain required the confirmation. The same day she had boarded a plane to Detroit to sit beside her dying mother. She looked up. Derek was already looking at her. His face was not cruel. It was not guilty. It was simply settled. The quiet expression of a man who has finished a task he has been putting off for a long time and feels, finally, the relief of it. She closed the envelope. She placed it in her purse. She turned back to her mother's casket, and she finished burying her mother without making a sound. The tea had gone cold. Victoria hadn't noticed. She was sitting at her mother's kitchen table, the long oak one, the one that had hosted 40 years of Sunday dinners and business calls and quiet arguments, with both hands wrapped around a mug she had stopped drinking from 20 minutes ago. The manila envelope sat beside it, unopened. She had carried it from the graveside, through the reception, through the long ride back to the estate, and set it down here like it was just another piece of mail. Cousin Constance moved through the house behind her. Soft footsteps. The muffled sound of phone calls taken in low, careful voices. Doors opening and closing. Constance had arrived at the estate 3 days ago and had not stopped moving since, coordinating with the caterers, speaking with the funeral home, fielding calls from investors and journalists and family friends who needed something to do with their grief. She did not ask Victoria if she needed help. She simply helped. That was Constance. She did not perform warmth. She performed presence. Victoria picked up the envelope. She opened it. She read every page. It took her 40 minutes. She read the way she used to read contracts, slowly, with the part of her brain that did not feel, the part that only measured. Paragraph by paragraph. She noted the structure, the language choices, the specific legal framing around asset division. Derek was requesting an equitable split of all marital assets, the Atlanta house, the joint accounts. His projected share of any revenue she might derive from future employment claimed against their shared lifestyle standard. His attorney was Benjamin Carr. She knew the name. Carr ran a boutique divorce firm in Buckhead that catered to high-net-worth clients and had a reputation for being very, very thorough. That was the word that settled into her chest like a stone. Thorough. She had spent enough years reading legal documents to know what a rushed filing looked like. A rushed filing had inconsistencies. It had boilerplate language dropped into the wrong sections, formatting that didn't quite align, arguments that hadn't been fully developed. Rushed filings were reactive, written by someone scrambling to catch up. This was not that. This had been constructed. Carefully. Over time. The asset inventory attached to the back of the petition was detailed in a way that required months of documentation. Financial records, property appraisals, account histories. Someone had been gathering this information quietly, methodically, for a long time. She set the last page down on the table. She picked up her cold tea. She took a sip. She put it back down. Outside, Detroit was doing what Detroit did in January, sitting low and gray and unbothered under a flat winter sky. The kitchen window looked out over the back garden, which her mother had kept immaculately even in death. The bare rose canes tied up in neat bundles for the cold, the brick path swept clean. Victoria sat with what she knew. That evening, Constance came and stood in the kitchen doorway, still dressed, still composed, looking like a woman who might have slept 2 hours and would not mention it. "Theo Banks called," she said. "He'd like to do the reading tomorrow morning. Here, if you're agreeable." Theodore Banks, her mother's estate attorney. A man Victoria had met exactly 4 times over the years. A tall, unhurried presence at the edges of her mother's professional life. She knew he was precise. She knew her mother had trusted him completely, which was not a distinction Gloria Okoro gave out freely. "Yes," Victoria said. "That's fine." Constance nodded. She looked at the envelope on the table, read it in a single glance, the way Constance read everything, and then looked back at Victoria. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She made Victoria a fresh cup of tea, set it down, and went back to work. That night, Victoria lay in her childhood bedroom and did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling and she thought about the last 18 months. She went through them the way she used to go through discovery documents, methodically, looking for the pattern she hadn't seen when she was living inside it. Derek's withdrawal had been gradual, not dramatic. He hadn't gone cold. He had gone elsewhere. His attention, which used to settle on her with real weight, had begun to feel like a light left on in a room nobody was sitting in anymore. He had launched a new LLC around 14 months ago, Langston Meridian Holdings, and when she asked about it, he was vague in the specific way of someone who is prepared to be vague. "Just restructuring some things, babe. Boring stuff." She had accepted that. She thought about how strangely relieved he had seemed, the last time she brought up going back to law. She had floated it carefully, maybe part-time once the baby comes, and instead of the gentle resistance she expected, he had just nodded and said, "Whatever you think is best," and then changed the subject. She had read it as growth. She had read it as him letting go of his old preferences. She understood now that he simply hadn't needed her to stay home anymore. He had already been working on his exit. She turned onto her side. On the nightstand was a small envelope, cream-colored, her name on the front in her mother's handwriting, small and precise and slightly forward-leaning, like the woman herself. Victoria. Just that. Constance had left it for her without explanation. She picked it up. She held it. She did not open it. She would open it in the morning, when Theo Banks was here. When she could hold whatever her mother had written and be in the same room as someone who had known what Gloria knew. She pressed the envelope against her chest, and she lay in the dark, and she thought. Theo Banks's office was on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Detroit that had been renovated sometime in the 90s and left alone ever since. The elevator was slow. The carpet in the hallway was a deep, dignified burgundy. The receptionist spoke in a near whisper, as though noise itself was a form of disrespect. The office was quiet, formal. The morning light came through tall windows in long, pale strips, falling across a mahogany desk that had clearly held the weight of serious things for a very long time. Theo stood when they entered. He was a tall man, somewhere in his mid-60s, with close-cut gray hair and the kind of stillness that comes from decades of delivering news that cannot be undone. He shook Constance's hand first, a small acknowledgement of shared history, and then took Victoria's hand in both of his. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said. He meant it. She could tell because he didn't add anything after it. They sat. The file in front of him was thick and neatly organized, held together with a dark green folder embossed with the name Gloria Adaize Okoro Langston in small gold letters. He opened it without ceremony. He began to read. The formal language of the will took up the first several pages. Victoria sat with her hands folded on her lap and listened. She knew how to listen to legal documents. She knew how to let the structure land before she let herself feel anything. The estate of Gloria Adaize Okoro Langston, built across 4 decades, starting from a single shea butter formula mixed in a Lagos kitchen, grown into Okoro Beauté, a global luxury beauty conglomerate with distribution in 61 countries, had been assessed at the time of death at a total value of $7.1 billion. The private investment arm, Okoro Capital Partners, held separately under the trust's umbrella, controlled another $1.4 billion in active portfolios. Sole heir, Victoria Adaize Okoro Langston. Theo paused briefly, the way a doctor pauses before a diagnosis. Then he continued. The inheritance was structured as a personal trust, established 11 years prior, predating the marriage to Derek Langston by 2 full years. Under Georgia law, and under the trust's explicit architecture, the inheritance was entirely insulated from any marital property claim. It could not be divided, contested, or touched by divorce proceedings. Victoria heard that. She filed it. Theo then explained that Gloria had quietly restructured the trust approximately 2 years ago. New provisions, updated language, tighter insulation around Victoria's sole authority over Okoro Capital Partners. 2 years ago. Victoria looked at Constance. Constance met her gaze and did not look away. She asked me to help coordinate the restructuring, Constance said. Her voice was even. No apology in it, but something close to tenderness. She asked me to keep it between us until the time came. Did she tell you why? Victoria asked. She said she wanted to make sure the structure was right. A brief pause. She said she wanted to make sure you were protected. Victoria turned back to the window. She watched a pigeon land on the ledge outside and then leave. Theo set the main document down and reached into the folder. He produced a smaller envelope, cream-colored, with Victoria's name on the front and her mother's handwriting. The same handwriting as the one she had held against her chest all night. He slid it across the desk to her. She left this with the estate documents, he said. She asked that it be given to you at the reading. Victoria looked at it for a moment. Then she picked it up and opened it. The letter was 1 paragraph. Her mother had never been wasteful with words. I watched him. I said nothing because you didn't ask. Now I'm asking you to trust what I built, and what I built you to be. That was all. Victoria read it once. She read it again. She set it flat on her lap and looked at it. The room was very quiet. Theo did not move. Constance did not move. Victoria sat with what her mother had written, and she understood, fully, finally, the way you understand something you have always suspected but refused to name, that Gloria Okoro had seen Derek Langston clearly, and had chosen to love her daughter more than she had hated watching him, and had spent the last years of her life building a wall strong enough to hold. She sat in that understanding for a long moment. Then she gathered the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it back in its envelope. She stood. She shook Theo's hand. She said, "Thank you." And she meant it the same way he had meant his condolences, without anything extra attached. She walked out. The parking structure was dim and smelled of cold concrete. Victoria found her car. She got in. She closed the door. And for the first time since the graveside, since Derek had stepped back and straightened his jacket and folded his hands, she cried. Not from grief. She had cried from grief. This was different. This was recognition. The specific, shattering relief of being seen by someone who was no longer there to tell. She cried until it was done. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand. She picked up her phone. She found Nadia's name. It rang once. "Tori, I need you to be a lawyer right now," Victoria said. "Not my friend. Just for 60 seconds. The flight back to Atlanta was 3 hours and 40 minutes. Derek carried her bag through the terminal without being asked. He held the car door open. He asked if she was comfortable, if the seat needed adjusting, if she wanted to stop somewhere before the highway. She said she was fine. She said it pleasantly. He drove. The Atlanta skyline came into view through low winter haze, and neither of them said anything about it for a long time. "I think we can make this easy," Derek said finally. His voice was measured, careful. The voice he used in meetings when he needed to close something without resistance. "That's all I want, Tori. I want it to be easy." "Okay," she said. "My attorney, Marcus, he's good at this, the collaborative side of it. He doesn't like things to get ugly." A pause. "Neither do I." "Okay," she said again. He glanced at her. She was looking out the window. "I just want what's fair," he said. "And I want us to be civil. For the baby." She turned to look at him then, just briefly. She gave him a small, tired smile. the smile of a woman who was grieving and exhausted and not interested in a fight. "That sounds good, Derek," she said. He exhaled. His shoulders came down a little. He reached over and briefly touched the back of her hand, the gesture of a man who believed he had just managed something difficult. She let him. The house felt different than she remembered. Larger, somehow. Or maybe just emptier. She moved through it slowly, trailing her fingers along the back of the couch, looking at the framed photos on the hall table. Them at a resort in Tulum, her in the garden, one of her mother standing in front of the original Okoro Beauté storefront in Lagos, which Derek had framed and hung there 2 Christmases ago like a gift. She left that one where it was. She slept in the guest room, citing the pregnancy. The mattress was too soft for her back, she told him. He nodded and said, "Of course." Said to take whatever she needed. Said he hoped she got some rest. He was very agreeable. So was she. Each night, after the light under his bedroom door went dark, she sat up in bed with her phone and got to work. She moved methodically, the way she used to prepare for depositions. One thing at a time. No skipping ahead. She photographed the statements from their joint checking account, going back 18 months, the same 18 months she had spent making excuses for the gaps she felt in their marriage. She screenshotted the investment account summaries. She found the records for the home equity line Derek had opened 14 months ago, the one he'd mentioned only once, briefly, and never again. She forwarded everything to Nadia through an encrypted file-sharing platform Nadia had set up the morning after their phone call. Clean, untraceable. Formatted to be useful, not just sent. She also called Theo. Not about the will, not about the grief, about Okoro Capital Partners, specifically about stepping into operational control faster than they had originally planned. Theo had anticipated this. He had the transition documents mostly drafted already. "There's a pending account you'll want to look at," he said. He had the same careful tone over the phone that he carried in person. Nothing wasted, nothing soft. A construction financing deal. 40 million. It's been in negotiation for about 8 months with a developer out of Atlanta. The file is on the vice president's desk. He's rotating off the account next week. "Who's the developer?" Victoria asked. Theo told her. Langston Meridian Holdings. She did not say anything for a moment. She looked at the dark ceiling of the guest room. Somewhere down the hall, she could hear the faint sound of Derek's television. "I'd like to absorb that account," she said. "Personally, I'd like that in writing. I'll have it to you by end of week," Theo said. She thanked him and hung up. She set the phone face down on the nightstand. She lay there in the dark for a while, not thinking about Derek, not thinking about what any of it meant yet, just letting it sit. Her mother had taught her that. Don't run at a thing before you know its shape. She knew the shape of this one. At dinner 2 days later, Derek made pasta. He poured her sparkling water with a lemon wedge because she couldn't drink wine. He asked about her back, about the baby's movement, about whether she'd been sleeping. "Better," she said. He nodded. He looked relieved. "Marcus is going to have a proposed settlement drafted by the end of the week," he said. He smiled. There was something just slightly too relaxed in it, the ease of a man who believed the hard part was behind him. "I think you'll find it's fair. That's really the goal here, Tori. Amicable." "That's the goal," she agreed. She twirled pasta onto her fork. She smiled back at him across the table, the tired, gentle smile he seemed to need from her. Beneath the table, her phone screen lit up against her thigh. "Nadia, I've started pulling records. Call me tomorrow morning. It's worse than you think." She set her alarm for 5:45. Derek never woke before 7. She slipped out of the guest room while the house was still dark, her phone already in her hand. She didn't turn on any lights. She moved down the hall by memory, into the guest bathroom, and closed the door behind her without making a sound. She sat on the edge of the tub. She called Nadia. Nadia picked up on the first ring. "Talk to me," Victoria said. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "Okay." Nadia's voice was tight. Not panicked. Nadia didn't panic, but the kind of tight that meant she had been sitting with something difficult for 2 days and was ready to put it down. "I'm going to go through it in order. I need you to let me finish before you say anything." "Go ahead." 18 months ago, Derek opened a private business account under Langston Meridian Holdings. At the time, he told you the LLC was for a new development project. Do you remember that? The Buckhead mixed-use deal, Victoria said. He said it needed its own entity for the financing structure. There is no Buckhead deal. There never was. The LLC has one function, to receive money. Nadia's delivery was even, deliberate. He's been moving funds from your joint accounts. Small transfers. 3,000 here, 8,000 there. Irregular amounts, irregular intervals. He stayed under the threshold that triggers automatic bank alerts. It looks like noise if you're not looking for a pattern. Victoria said nothing. Over 18 months, he moved $2.3 million. The number sat in the air of the small bathroom. Outside, nothing moved. The house was quiet. Okay, Victoria said. There's more. Nadia took a breath. I got access to a first draft of the divorce petition through Discovery channels. The original draft was sent to Derek's attorney 14 months ago. Do you remember what happened 14 months ago? Victoria closed her eyes. I told him I was pregnant, she said. 2 weeks after you told him, Nadia said. He called Marcus Hale and told him to start drafting. The first draft of the petition to end their marriage had been written before she had finished her first trimester, before she had told anyone else, before she had even let herself fully believe it was real. She had told Derek in their bedroom on a Tuesday night. He had held her. He had cried. She remembered thinking, this is it. This is the version of him I always knew was in there. 14 days later, he had called his divorce attorney. Tori, Nadia's voice came through carefully. Are you with me? I'm here, Victoria said. Keep going. A pause. Then, 11 months ago, Derek attended your family dinner in Detroit, the one in January when your mother's diagnosis was first discussed. Victoria went very still. He was there, she said slowly. He flew up for it. He said he wanted to be there for me. He knew she was terminal. He knew her timeline. Nadia's voice was controlled, but something moved beneath it, something she was working to keep flat. He spent the next 11 months building his exit. He timed the filing to land while you were in Detroit, while you were watching your mother die. A beat. And then he didn't send a process server, Tori. He didn't have Marcus deliver it. He put it in his jacket pocket and carried it through the entire funeral service, and he handed it to you himself. Victoria looked at the bathroom mirror. Her own face looked back at her, still, pale lit by the faint gray coming through the frosted window. She thought about that suit jacket, the good black one. She had gone with him to buy it 2 years ago, a Saturday afternoon at a department store in Buckhead, standing in the fitting room doorway while he turned in front of the mirror, asking if it fit right across the shoulders. She had said yes. She had straightened the lapel with her own hands. He had worn it to her mother's funeral with a manila envelope in the inside pocket. He had stood at Gloria Adaize-Okoro's graveside and waited for the right moment. She let the silence go for a long time. Nadia didn't fill it. Finally, Victoria spoke. Her voice came out steady, not forced, just steady. Does the prenuptial agreement have a fidelity clause? A pause. She could hear Nadia moving papers. It does, Nadia said. There was something in her voice now, not quite satisfaction, but close to it, precise. Derek's attorney apparently never flagged it as a serious enforcement risk. They dismissed it early on, standard boilerplate, they probably figured. A pause. They were wrong. Thank you, Victoria said. Tori, I'll call you tonight. She ended the call. She sat still for one more moment, looking at herself in the mirror. The pearl brooch was on the nightstand back in the guest room. Her mother's handwriting was folded in her coat pocket, worn soft at the creases from how many times she'd unfolded and refolded it. Trust what I built, and what I built you to be. She stood up. She unlocked the bathroom door and walked down the hall toward the kitchen. She filled the coffee maker with water. She measured the grounds Derek liked, the dark roast, the expensive one she had started buying because he mentioned once that he preferred it. She pressed the button. She listened to the machine begin to run. The house phone rang at 2:17 in the afternoon. Victoria was at the kitchen table reviewing a document Theo had sent over, a financial summary from the Okoro Capital Partners account transfer. Derek was at his office. He had kissed her on the cheek that morning before he left. A light, careful kiss. The kind a man gives when he is performing the role of decent husband for an audience of no one. She picked up the phone on the second ring. Hello? Silence. Not dead silence. Breathing silence. The kind with a person behind it. Hello? She said again. The line went dead. Half a second. Maybe less. But in that half second before the click, she heard it. 3 tones. High, middle, low. The elevator chime at Derek's office building on Peachtree. She had heard it hundreds of times, standing in the lobby with her coat on, waiting for him to come down for lunch, watching the brass doors open. 3 tones. The same 3 tones in the same order every single time. Victoria set the phone down on the table. She looked at it for a moment. Then she pulled her cell phone from her pocket and opened her contacts. She did not call Derek. She scrolled past his name without pausing. She stopped on Raymond Whitfield. She held the phone for a moment, not because she was uncertain, but because she was composing herself into exactly the right shape. Raymond was not a simple man. He was careful, socially fluent, the kind of man who could read a room and adjust himself inside 2 seconds. She had watched him do it at dinner parties for years. He was not going to respond to pressure. He was going to respond to permission. She typed a text message. Raymond, I know you've been thinking about me. I'd love to grab coffee tomorrow if you have 20 minutes. Just a friendly check-in. It's been a hard week. She pressed send. His response came in 4 minutes. Of course, name the place. The cafe was small and away from Midtown, a neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and good light, the kind of place where no one from Derek's world would be having a breakfast meeting. Victoria arrived first. She ordered 2 coffees and chose a table near the window. Raymond walked in at 9:05. He was dressed for the office, tie loosened slightly. He looked, she thought, like a man who had not slept well. She smiled when he sat down. Warm, unhurried. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup. How are you holding up? I'm okay, she said. Day by day. He nodded. He looked at the table. She let him sit with that for a moment. Then she set her cup down and folded her hands and said, quietly and without drama, Raymond, I already know. I just need you to tell me one thing. He looked up. She held his gaze. She did not soften her expression, and she did not sharpen it. She simply looked at him, steady, clear, patient, and she watched the particular thing happen in his face that she had known would happen. The relief of a man who has been holding something too long and has just been handed a reason to put it down. His jaw moved. He looked back at the table, then back at her. How long? She asked. Raymond exhaled through his nose. A short, controlled breath. 2 years, he said. She said nothing. She waited. Her name is Eleanor Price, he said, voice low. She's a junior associate. She's young, Tori. She's not... He stopped, started again. I told him to end it when you got pregnant. I told him it had gone far enough. He looked at the window. He told me it was handled. But it wasn't. No. He shook his head once. It wasn't. Did you know? She asked. About the filing. About the timing. He was quiet for just a moment too long. Not the specifics, he said carefully. She nodded. That was enough. Thank you, Raymond, she said. She said it simply, without coldness, without warmth, just the plain words. She picked up the check before he could reach for it. She paid at the counter, put on her coat, and walked out into the gray morning air. That evening, Victoria sat at the kitchen table after Derek had gone to bed. She tore a clean sheet from the legal pad she kept in the kitchen drawer. She clicked her pen. She drew 2 lines down the page, making 3 columns. At the top of the first, what I know. At the top of the second, what I can prove. At the top of the third, what I still need. She wrote for 20 minutes without stopping. The pen moved steadily. When she got to the bottom of the 3rd column, she paused. She drew a line beneath it. Underneath the line, she wrote one name. Okoro Capital Partners. She circled it once. Then she circled it again. The call to Theo Banks lasted 11 minutes. Victoria made it from the back porch, early morning, a cup of tea going cold on the railing beside her. The Atlanta air was still cool. Derek was asleep upstairs. "I'd like to formally assume the Okoro Capital Partners account currently assigned to Marcus Webb," she said. "I understand he's transitioning off at the end of the month." "That's correct," Theo said. "The account is in active negotiation. I can have the internal transfer documentation to you by end of day." "Thank you, Theo." "Victoria." A pause, small but deliberate. "It's good to have you at the table." She picked up her tea. "It's good to be there." She hung up and stood on the porch for a moment, watching a bird move through the oak tree at the edge of the yard. Then she went inside and started Derek's coffee. The transfer was completed within the week. No announcement, no fanfare. Just a name change on an internal account file at Okoro Capital Partners and a new signature on 3 pending documents. Marcus Webb sent a brief, professional handoff note. Victoria read it, filed it, and opened the full account record. The financing agreement with Langston Meridian Holdings was right there on page 2. $40 million in construction financing for a mixed-use development in Buckhead. 8 months in negotiation. Signatures pending. She read the full file twice. Then she closed it and moved on to the next item on her list. Derek grew comfortable with the silence. She could see it happening. Gradual and predictable. The way a man relaxes when he believes the hard part is already over. He stopped being quite so careful with the word amicable. He started leaving his laptop open on the kitchen counter. He scheduled a weekend golf trip with Raymond and mentioned it at dinner in the casual way of someone who no longer feels the need to explain himself. He was waiting for her to accept the terms. He believed she would. Meanwhile, Nadia worked. Victoria got the updates in pieces, a phone call here, an encrypted document there, a summary delivered in Nadia's clipped, precise voice that carried no editorializing because it didn't need any. The financial forensics were complete. Every transfer Derek had made through Langston Meridian Holdings was now documented. The dates, the amounts, the accounts. 27 separate transactions over 18 months, $2.3 million, moved in increments designed to stay invisible. Under Georgia law, it constituted marital waste. Nadia had 3 precedents ready. The prenuptial agreement had been reviewed by 2 independent attorneys. The fidelity clause was enforceable. It had always been enforceable. Derek's team had either missed it or decided to gamble that Victoria wouldn't find it, wouldn't understand it, or wouldn't have the resources to act on it. The clause was specific. Documented infidelity triggered full forfeiture of Derek's premarital holdings, including his equity stake in Langston Group Properties, the original firm he'd built before the marriage. The firm that represented the majority of his personal net worth outside of what he'd already moved. Nadia sent a summary with a single line at the bottom. He handed us the knife when he signed this agreement. Derek's proposed settlement arrived on a Tuesday. Victoria read it at the kitchen table while Derek was at the office. 8 pages. His attorney had written it carefully. Moderate spousal support, primary custody of the baby contingent on Victoria's agreement not to contest the LLC transfers, a clean division of the marital home. It was, she noticed, exactly the settlement of a man who believed he was negotiating with someone who had no other options. She put it in the leather portfolio on her desk. She did not call his attorney. She did not send a response. She let him wait. The letter from Okoro Capital Partners went out on a Thursday. It was addressed to Derek's attorney and copied to the lead contact at Langston Meridian Holdings. Theo drafted it. The language was formal, measured, and final. Okoro Capital Partners was withdrawing from all financing agreements with Langston Meridian Holdings, effective immediately, citing undisclosed conflicts of interest and active litigation involving a principal party. The $40 million deal was gone. Victoria was not in the room when it landed. She was at Nadia's kitchen table, eating leftover rice, when Nadia's phone buzzed with a notification from a mutual contact in Atlanta's development circles. Nadia looked at the screen. Then she looked at Victoria. Victoria kept eating. She called Derek's office the following Monday and asked his assistant to schedule a meeting. A mediation session, she said. Financial disclosure. Moving the process forward. Derek's assistant called back within the hour to confirm. She imagined the call he made to his attorney afterward. She imagined the word finally. The night before the meeting, Victoria stood at her desk. 3 manila folders. She labeled each one in her clean, even handwriting and slid them into the leather portfolio she had used during her years at the firm. It still smelled faintly of the old office. She pressed the clasp closed. She walked down the hall to the nursery and stood in the doorway. Baby Gloria was asleep on her back, her small fists loosely curled, her face utterly at peace. 10 days old and already stubborn about her sleep schedule. "Hey, baby," Victoria whispered. Gloria's chest rose and fell. Victoria stood there for a long moment. Then she turned off the hallway light and walked to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed. Her mother's pearl brooch was on the nightstand, catching the faint glow from the window. She did not pick it up. She just looked at it for a moment. Then she lay down, closed her eyes, and let herself sleep. Derek arrived 7 minutes early. Victoria knew because she was already seated when his car pulled into the parking structure below. Nadia had texted her from the lobby. "They're here. He's smiling." She had straightened her portfolio on the table in front of her, checked that the folders were in order, and folded her hands. Then she waited. The conference room was on the 14th floor of a glass tower in Midtown, a neutral location, which had been Derek's attorney's suggestion. Neutral was fine. The location had never been the point. The room was clean and cool, with floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city. A long mahogany table, high-backed chairs, a pitcher of water nobody had touched. Nadia sat to Victoria's right, a yellow legal pad in front of her, pen already uncapped. Theo sat to Victoria's left, hands folded, expression still as Sunday morning. Victoria wore the ivory suit. Structured shoulders, single button, clean lines. She had pinned her mother's pearl brooch at the lapel. The door opened. Derek walked in ahead of his attorney, a tall, silver-haired man named Caldwell who had the practiced ease of someone who had done this 100 times. Derek had that same ease. He was dressed in a charcoal suit, a pale blue tie. He looked good. He knew it. His eyes swept the room and landed on Victoria. Something moved across his face, too quick to name, but she caught it. A small adjustment, barely anything. He recovered in less than a second. "Tori." He said it gently, the way you'd greet someone fragile. "You look well." Victoria said nothing. She gestured to the chairs across the table. Derek pulled out a chair and sat down. Caldwell settled beside him, opened a leather binder, and clicked his pen. He glanced at Nadia with the mild recognition of a man who did not yet understand what he was looking at. "Before we begin," Caldwell said, "I want to acknowledge that this process has been difficult for everyone involved, and our client wants to move forward in a spirit of, 'We'll begin now,'" Victoria said. Not loud, not rude, just clear. Caldwell stopped. She opened her portfolio. She placed the first folder on the table and slid it across to Derek's side with a single smooth motion. "Folder 1, she said. "Financial forensics. 27 transactions over 18 months, executed through Langston Meridian Holdings. The full account record, the originating transfers, the destination accounts, and the corresponding dates." She paused one beat. $2.3 million. Derek's jaw tightened, just slightly. "The first draft of your divorce petition was sent to Mr. Caldwell's office 14 days after I told you I was pregnant." She let that sit for exactly 2 seconds. Every transfer in that folder maps against 2 timelines. My mother's illness, my pregnancy. The pattern is not subtle. Caldwell had stopped writing. He was reading the first page of the folder, and the color in his face was doing something it hadn't done when he walked in. Derek said nothing. Victoria placed the second folder on the table. "Folder 2, she said. "Your prenuptial agreement. Specifically, Section 9, Paragraph 4, the fidelity clause." She did not look at Caldwell when she said the next part. She kept her eyes on Derek. "It is active. It is enforceable. 2 independent attorneys have reviewed and confirmed this in writing. Documented infidelity triggers full forfeiture of your premarital holdings, including your equity stake in Langston Group properties." The silence in the room was total. Derek's expression had gone very still. Not calm, still. The way a man goes still when something he has never once prepared for is happening directly in front of him. She placed the third folder on the table. Folder 3. A withdrawal letter from Okoro Capital Partners, effective last Thursday. Langston Meridian Holdings financing agreement has been terminated, citing undisclosed conflicts of interest and active litigation involving a principal party. She closed her portfolio and pressed the clasp shut. The $40 million deal is gone. Caldwell leaned toward Derek and said something low and urgent. Derek didn't move. Victoria looked at him directly. She had waited for this moment without rehearsing it, and now that it was here, it required nothing extra from her. No heat, no volume, just the words, and the truth behind them. "You put that envelope in my hands at my mother's funeral," she said. "You stood there in the suit I helped you pick out and watched my face. You thought grief would make me small." She picked up her portfolio and pushed her chair back. "My mother didn't raise small women." She stood. She walked toward the door, unhurried, her heels quiet against the floor. Behind her, she heard Caldwell's chair scrape back. "Ms. Okoro Langston." His voice had changed entirely. The practiced ease was gone. "We'd like to request a recess before—" She kept walking. She pushed through the door and let it close behind her. Caldwell called Nadia the next morning at 8:15. Victoria was in the kitchen feeding Gloria when Nadia's name lit up her phone screen. She let it ring twice, then answered on speaker, her free hand steadying the bottle. "He wants to renegotiate," Nadia said, without greeting. Caldwell called it a revised framework. I called it what it is. "And what did you tell him?" "That the framework already exists. It's in 3 folders. He has copies." Victoria looked down at her daughter. Gloria's eyes were closed, her mouth working steadily against the bottle. She had her grandmother's brow. The same particular stillness. "Let them come to us," Victoria said. "They already are." The civil proceedings moved faster than Derek's team had anticipated. Once the marital waste documentation entered the record, Derek's lending partners had no choice. They ordered their own audit of Langston Meridian Holdings within the week. What they found confirmed what Nadia had already mapped. Systematic transfers, irregular intervals, a paper trail that had been built to avoid attention and had failed at exactly that. The LLC was dissolved by court order 17 days after the conference room. The order was 2 pages. It was not dramatic. It simply ended a thing that should not have existed. Raymond Whitfield called Nadia before she had to call him. He arrived at her office with a brown accordion folder and the expression of a man who had been carrying something too heavy for too long and had finally decided to set it down. He had kept records, not out of principle, he admitted, but out of instinct. The instinct of a businessman who had never fully trusted his partner's judgment and had quietly documented what he witnessed over 2 years. He testified. He was thorough. He did not editorialize. Victoria did not attend that session. She did not need to. Nadia approached Eleanor Price on a Tuesday afternoon, at a coffee shop 2 blocks from Derek's office, a location Nadia chose deliberately, so that Eleanor would understand this was not an ambush but an accounting. She did not go in with anger, she went in with paper. She laid the documents out in sequence without commentary. The date the affair began, cross-referenced against Victoria's pregnancy announcement, cross-referenced against the date Derek's attorney received the first draft of the divorce petition. She showed Eleanor the timeline the way you show someone a map. Here is where you were. Here is what was actually happening around you. Eleanor sat very still while she read. She had believed the marriage was over in every meaningful sense before she came into the picture. She had believed the pregnancy had been an accident that Derek was handling with care and responsibility. She had believed she was waiting on the other side of something that had already ended. None of it was true. She did not cry in the coffee shop. She read every page twice, asked 2 quiet questions, and then folded her hands on the table and looked at a spot somewhere past Nadia's shoulder for a long moment. She signed the statement that afternoon. 2 years. Written, dated, witnessed. She did it for herself. Victoria understood that, and did not require it to be anything more. Derek called Victoria directly on a Thursday evening. Her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. His name on the screen. She looked at it for exactly as long as it took to recognize the violation, then picked it up, let it ring once more, and set it back down without answering. She screenshot the call log and forwarded it to Nadia. He called Raymond that same night. Raymond, to his credit, was direct. "It's over, Derek. All of it." He called cousin Constance 2 days later. Constance answered, listened to his opening sentence, and ended the call without speaking. She set her phone on the kitchen table, picked up her tea, and did not mention it to Victoria until 3 days had passed and it no longer seemed worth mentioning at all. The divorce finalized on a Wednesday. Victoria signed the papers at Nadia's office. A clean, bright space with framed prints on the walls, and afternoon light coming in through the blinds in long, warm strips. Nadia slid the final document across the desk. Victoria read every line, the way she had always read every line of everything. Then she signed her name, handed it back. "It's done," Nadia said. "I know." They sat together for a moment in the quiet. Nadia did not ask how she felt. Victoria did not try to explain it. She drove home to Gloria. That evening, after the baby's bath, after the bottle and the soft light and the low music she had started playing in the evenings because it seemed to calm them both, Victoria sat in the nursery rocker in the dark with her daughter against her chest. The house was quiet. She did not feel victorious. The word had never quite fit, even in her most private thoughts. Victory implied a competition she had wanted to be in. She had not wanted to be in this. What she felt was finished, not empty, not hollow, just done. The way a room feels after everything unnecessary has finally been cleared out of it. She understood the difference completely. She rocked her daughter in the dark, and the night was still. The call came on a Thursday morning. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Victoria was at her desk reviewing a grant proposal when her phone buzzed. An Atlanta area code she didn't recognize. She answered on the second ring. "Victoria." The voice was soft, careful. "Marilyn Langston, Derek's mother. I know I have no right to ask, but we'd like to see you. Just once, if you'll allow it." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Saturday," she said. 11 o'clock. "My home." They arrived 5 minutes early. Harold Langston rang the doorbell. Marilyn stood slightly behind him, her hands folded together at her waist, dressed in a gray coat that looked like she had chosen it deliberately. Subdued, appropriate, almost apologetic in its plainness. Harold was a tall man, still broad in the shoulders, but something in him seemed smaller than Victoria remembered. He held his hat in both hands. Victoria opened the door and let them in. She did not hug them. They did not try to hug her. She led them to the living room and waited while they settled onto the sofa side by side. She sat across from them in the armchair, her chair in her home on her time, and folded her hands in her lap and looked at them both. "Thank you for coming," she said. She meant it. That was the strange thing. She genuinely did. She told them everything. Not the version she had offered lawyers and mediators and court filings, stripped down to facts and figures. The full account. She told it the way it had actually happened, in sequence, so they could feel the weight of each piece before the next one landed. She told them about the $2.3 million the LLC, the irregular transfers that had been running for 18 months before the papers were ever filed. She opened the leather portfolio on the coffee table and laid the documents out, one at a time, and let them look. She told them about the timing, how the first draft of the divorce petition reached Derek's attorney 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks, after she told him she was pregnant. She showed them the date. She let it sit there. She told them about Eleanor. She told them about Raymond. About what Raymond confirmed over coffee, and what he later confirmed under oath. And then she told them about the funeral. She told them how their son had stood at Gloria Okoro's grave, in the good black suit, the one Victoria had helped him choose, the one she had straightened at the shoulders before they left the hotel, and had worked the room the way he always did. Handshakes, a palm on a shoulder, the composed, devoted son-in-law. She told them how she had watched him move through the crowd and assumed, when he turned toward her at the graveside, that he was finally coming to stand beside her. She told them what he put in her hands instead. She told them he had carried that envelope inside his jacket through the entire service, through the hymns, through the pastor's words, through the lowering of the casket, the whole time. She showed them the filing date on the petition. Marilyn Langston made a sound, small and sudden, like something breaking quietly inside her. Her hand went to her mouth. Harold sat perfectly still beside her, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere near the floor, and he did not raise them again. Victoria gave them the silence they needed. She did not rush it. She did not cry. She had already given all of those tears to the appropriate moments. This was not one of them. When the room had been quiet long enough, she closed the portfolio and set it to one side. "I loved him," she said. It was not an accusation. It was simply true, and they deserved to hear it plainly. "I want you to understand that. I am not someone who made a careless choice." Harold's jaw tightened. He nodded once at the floor. Marilyn wiped her eyes and kept them down. "I'm not asking you for an apology," Victoria continued. "And I'm not offering forgiveness. Not today. Maybe not ever. That's not what this meeting is." She looked at them both, Harold first, then Marilyn, and waited until she had their eyes. "Your son will have access to his daughter on the schedule the court has determined." Her voice was level, unhurried. "That is my final word on what he is owed." The room held. Then Victoria stood, and they stood with her, and she walked them to the front door and opened it onto the cool morning air. Marilyn paused on the threshold and turned back once, her face open and undone in the way of someone who wants to say something and cannot find the words for it. Victoria held the door and waited. Nothing came. She nodded once, gentle, final. She closed the door. 14 months later, the oak trees in the West End were gold at the tips, and the late afternoon light came through them in long, warm shafts that moved slowly across the porch boards as the sun lowered itself toward the roof lines. Victoria Adayeze Okoro. Her name again. Fully and legally hers again. The first document she had signed after the divorce was finalized. Sat in a wide wooden chair on the back porch of her home. It was a restored Craftsman on a quiet street in Atlanta's oldest black neighborhood. High ceilings inside. Original hardwood floors she had refinished herself, on her hands and knees, on a Saturday in the spring, because she had wanted to. A garden in progress out back, mostly ambitious at this stage but growing. Cousin Constance had the bedroom at the end of the hall. Not as a guest, not as a dependent, but as the woman who had helped build the legacy now being carried forward, and who had earned her place in this house the way she had earned everything. Quietly, completely, without needing to be asked twice. Nadia's name was on the door of the legal office on the 3rd floor of the Okoro Capitol building downtown. General counsel. They had lunch on Fridays. They did not talk about Derek. The work at Okoro Capital Partners had become something Victoria had not fully anticipated. Not a duty she had stepped into, but a calling she had grown into. The giving arm had been restructured from the ground up, her mother's name on the building, her own vision inside it. The fellowship launched in the spring. 12 women in the first cohort. Corporate attorneys, financial analysts, marketing directors, all of them standing at the edge of something they had built inside institutions that had never fully seen them, trying to find the footing to leap. Victoria had stood at that edge herself. She knew exactly what it needed. She had not started dating. She was not thinking about it. She was occupied. Baby Gloria was 10 months old, solid and curious and relentlessly interested in everything within reach. She sat now in Victoria's lap, her small back against her mother's chest, her hands open and grasping at the air in front of her. She had her grandmother's brow, the particular focused stillness of a person who is paying close attention to the world. Victoria's phone was on the armrest beside her. It buzzed once. She glanced at it. A news alert. A real estate consortium had filed suit against a developer for fraudulent financing disclosures. The developer's name was Derek Langston. Victoria looked at it for one moment. Then she turned her phone face down on the armrest. Baby Gloria reached toward the light coming through the trees, her fingers spread wide, reaching for the gold. Victoria watched her reach. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.